I never even wanted to become famous. I work for a living. You know what I do? I sing, I write songs, I make records, I do gigs. I work for a living.
From the moment a young Van Morrison first heard Ray Charles on the American Forces Network, something irreparable happened to his musical DNA. Growing up in post-war Belfast with a father who kept an enviable collection of American jazz, blues and folk records, Morrison found Charles's voice to be not just a sound, but a revelation.
Never running in the streets and leaving me alone. She knows a woman's place right there now in her home.
I was the one that got into the R&B and soul. I bought the 45s and the LPs myself. You know. So that wasn't his collection, that was my collection. His collection was more like Louis Armstrong, Bechet, through to, Leadbelly, folk blues, Sonny Terry, Bernie McGee.
With Ray, the word soul comes to mind, Morrison later reflected, underlining that this was more than admiration. It was the recognition of a kindred spirit.
What impact did it have on me? Well, it kind of, for want of a better word, spiritual, if you want to call it that sort of thing,
Charles's seamless merging of gospel fervor with the secular freedoms of R&B and jazz gave Morrison a blueprint for emotional authenticity. Albums like Modern Sounds in country and western music offered a lesson in how genres could dissolve under the weight of sheer feeling. Morrison absorbed that lesson deeply, using it to fuel his own mythic fusions on records like Astral Weeks and Moondance. Yet for all the inspiration Charles provided, he also presented a formidable challenge. Morrison found himself grappling with the sheer audacity of Charles's talent, the sense that emotional sincerity needed to be matched by technical command. The bar had been set dizzyingly high. Confronted by the technical mastery of Ray Charles, Morrison sought solace in the raw, elemental power of John Lee Hooker. Hooker's music was not about virtuosity, it was about feel, rhythm, and the hypnotic spell of repetition. Morrison first encountered Hooker's gravelly chants through his father's records, and later cemented that early admiration into friendship, even recording the Grammy-winning Don't Look Back together.
Look back.
Hooker was primal, Morrison said in a 1995 interview. He could get more out of one chord than most singers get out of a whole symphony. It was a vital realization for Morrison, teaching him that it was not complexity that moved people, but connection. Hooker's relentless grooves and minimalist approach emboldened Morrison to trust his instincts, to embrace the power of a vamp or a mantra. However, the path Hooker illuminated was also fraught. Morrison now faced a dilemma: how to balance the improvisational freedom he admired with the demands of structured songwriting expected by commercial record labels. In seeking a model for balancing soulfulness with commercial accessibility, Morrison found his next guide in Sam Cooke. If Hooker represented the primal scream, Cooke embodied the polished prayer. Known for his crystalline voice and uncanny phrasing, Cooke moved with ease between the sacred and the secular, first as the voice of the soul stirrers, and later as a solo pop phenomenon. Morrison spoke often of Cooke's ability to sing like a bird, but still sound like a man, marveling at the effortless way he floated atop a melody without sacrificing emotional truth. Songs like A Change Is Gonna Come and You Send Me taught Morrison that you could be vulnerable without being sentimental, direct without being blunt. Inspired, Morrison began sharpening his own approach to melody and phrasing, notably on songs such as Crazy Love and Into the Mystic.
One night the foghorn blows, young I will be coming home.
Yet learning from Cooke also brought fresh conflict. Morrison was no stranger to the demands of authenticity, but could he maintain it while courting broader appeal? The risk of diluting his intensity for commercial success loomed large. Let us know in the comments if you agree or disagree with Van Morrison's musical choices so far, and don't forget to stick around until the very end of the video, where we reveal a surprising opinion he once shared about one of the most famous singers in history. It's a revelation that might just change how you see him. The struggle to balance authenticity and accessibility was answered in part by Jackie Wilson, whose exuberant showmanship and mighty vocal chops demonstrated that soul music could be deeply felt and joyfully delivered. Morrison has often spoken of Wilson's influence with a smile, recalling how Reet Petite and Higher offered him a vision of music as an ecstatic release. Jackie didn't just sing the song, Morrison said in an interview with Rolling Stone in 1978. He lived it out, every note. Morrison's tribute to Wilson, Jackie Wilson said, captures not only Wilson's spirit, but Morrison's gratitude for having learned that transcendence could be both spiritual and celebratory. However, embracing this spirit of joy presented its own perils. Morrison, whose own temperament leaned toward introspection and spiritual seeking, risked being seen as frivolous if he let too much exuberance into his art. The tension between solemnity and celebration became a thread that would run through much of his subsequent work. As Morrison wrestled with how to balance intensity and elation, he was drawn back to the bedrock of Leadbelly's storytelling blues.
Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene.
Huddie Ledbetter's ballads, steeped in folk traditions and lived experience, offered Morrison a grounding force. Leadbelly's songs like Goodnight Irene and Midnight Special told stories with a clarity and weight that Morrison found irresistible. Leadbelly wasn't trying to impress anyone, Morrison observed in an early interview with the BBC. He just told you how it was. For Morrison, whose lyrics often dance between the mystical and the mundane, Leadbelly's plain-spoken artistry was a vital compass. It showed that you could weave poetry into everyday life, and that the smallest details could carry the biggest truths. Yet even as Leadbelly offered grounding, there remained a persistent conflict. Could Morrison, a white Northern Irishman, authentically channel these African-American musical traditions without accusations of imitation or appropriation? It was Solomon Burke, the self-proclaimed king of rock and soul, who offered Morrison a vision of how to inhabit a tradition respectfully, but fully. Burke's sermons set to rhythm and blues music revealed a performer deeply rooted in the gospel church, yet worldly in delivery. Morrison admired the authority in Burke's voice, describing him as someone who carried the weight of the whole congregation in his throat. When Morrison first met Burke backstage at a London concert in the early 1970s, he was struck not just by Burke's voice, but by his bearing, regal, commanding, yet deeply human. He was a preacher who could rock you and then redeem you, Morrison quipped years later. Burke showed that it was possible to channel traditions into something personal and towering without reducing them to pastiche. Nevertheless, Burke's towering example brought Morrison back to a familiar tension: the challenge of living up to the legacy of the masters he revered, while forging a voice unmistakably his own.
What about Elvis? What kind of impact did Elvis's voice have when you heard it?
Didn't have any impact whatsoever. When I heard rock and roll, it wasn't that much of an impact because I'd already heard rhythm and blues. But to me, rock and roll, I veered more towards Gene Vincent and Carl Perkins. But that's what I liked. I never really got into Elvis Presley.